So if you've read Antigone, you know that she's coming from a really weird sort of background herself. And I want to sort of map out what Jacques Lacan refers to as the family ate, the sort of family sin or the family madness. Because it goes back a couple of generations for Antigone. She's not the start of the story. She's kind of the end of it. So here's Antigone down here. But the story goes back a couple of generations to her grandfather, Laius, and her grandmother, who's also her mother. Yeah, that's like the, in a nutshell right there, Jocasta, right? So Laius and Jocasta are the king and queen of Thebes. So they are a royal couple, and they are, by all accounts, good and wise rulers. But they receive a prophecy, and the prophecy is that they're going to have a child, and that child is going to grow up to kill its father, marry its mother. So when the child, Oedipus, is born, Laius and Jocasta do what any right-thinking royal family would do at this point. They take the baby and they drive a spike through its ankles and they leave it on a mountain to be eaten by wolves, because apparently that's what you do. Right? Now, unfortunately for everybody involved, but fortunately for us who are lovers of drama, a shepherd finds the baby on Mount Kithron and brings it to another couple in a far-off land who raise the child as their own. And that's how he gets the name Oedipus. Oedipus literally means swollen foot. Thanks, mom and dad. So now he's being raised by this other couple long way. Now, Oedipus grows up, and as he becomes a young man, he too receives this prophecy that he is fated to kill his father and marry his mother. Of course, not knowing that he's adopted, he assumes that this refers to his foster mother and father. And so as a result, he says, well, no one wants this to happen, so the best thing for me is to get the hell out of Dodge. So naturally, he takes off. Right? And he figures if he can put enough distance between his mom and his dad and himself, then there's no way that this prophecy can come true, that he'll be able to avoid fate. And that's the key to all of this. It's a question of fate. So Oedipus takes off and he heads, of course, toward Thebes, not knowing that that's his homeland. Now, as he's heading towards Thebes, he's on a sort of muddy road, and somebody in another chariot comes the other direction. And neither one of them wants to pull off into the mud where they're going to get stuck. And so they get out of their chariots and words are exchanged. And in what can only be described as the first incidents of road rage, swords are drawn and Oedipus kills the guy, who of course is his father Laius, right? Though he doesn't know it at the time. So Oedipus goes on about his business and he makes his way into Thebes. And there at Thebes, the recently widowed queen, Jocasta, is struggling with a civic problem, which is a sphinx has taken up residence and is tormenting the town. And the way to get rid of the sphinx, apparently, is that you have to solve her riddle. And so dozens of brave, strapping young lads have come from all over Greece to challenge the Sphinx, and she's, eaten them all because they get the question wrong. So Oedipus, right, young, strapping lad that he is, goes to challenge the Sphinx, and the Sphinx asks this question: what walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs in the afternoon, and 3 legs in the evening? And Oedipus, of course, knows that the answer is a man who crawls on all fours as a baby, stands upright as an adult, and leans on a cane as an old man. Now, having solved the riddle of the Sphinx obligingly hurls herself off of a cliff and dies, because I guess those are the rules. So now Oedipus has saved Thebes from the plague of this horrible Sphinx. And so he comes back into Thebes as a great hero and promptly falls in bed with, in bed with Jocasta, who is the queen, and unbeknownst to him, his mother. So now he has brought the prophecy to its fruition. He's killed his father and married his mother. And notice that everything that Oedipus does and everything that Jocasta and Laius do to try to prevent this prophecy from coming true is exactly what leads to it coming true. That fate is an inescapable force. No matter what you do, you cannot ultimately escape your fate. And this is going to be an important idea, an important concept in Nietzsche as well. So fast forward a little bit. Oedipus and Jocasta are the new king and queen of Thebes. And by all accounts, they are good and wise rulers. They're doing a good job. But the city is again suffering from a plague. And Oedipus figures out that it's because somebody has committed a horrible crime that has gone undetected. And so he devotes himself to finding the person who has committed that horrible crime and driving them out of the city. The horrible criminal, of course, is himself. And once he figures this out, he does indeed drive himself out of the city, ultimately blinding himself with the needles that hold together Jocasta's robes, when she, having figured it out as well, is found swinging from the central beam of the house where she has hanged herself. Okay, so now Laius is dead, Jocasta is dead, Oedipus has driven needles into his eyes and has been driven out of the city. He eventually dies. So pretty much everybody's dead at this point. But before all of that happens, Oedipus and Jocasta, who remember are mother and son, have 4 children. And their children are Eteocles, Polynices, Antigone, and everyone's favorite, the whiny little Ismene. So now, since Jocasta's dead, Laius is dead, Oedipus is gone and presumed dead, Eteocles and Polynices are going to take over Thebes. So they inherit the crown. By most accounts, Eteocles and Polynices are twins. So they come up with this really cool power sharing agreement where Eteocles is going to be king for 5 years and Polynices is going to go into exile. But after 5 years, Polynices is going to come back and Eteocles is going to give him the crown and Eteocles is going to go into exile. And they're going to swap every 5 years until one of them dies and then the other one will take over. And if you've got siblings, then I can say that this works out about as well as you would expect. Eteocles is king for 5 years. Polynices goes into exile. Polynices comes back. Eteocles says, yeah, I've sort of gotten used to being king. I don't think I'm going to give you the crown. So Polynices raises an army of mercenaries, foreigners, and attacks Thebes. So, of course, as these things play out, Eteocles and Polynices meet each other in single combat outside of one of the gates of Thebes and promptly slaughter each other. So now, Jocasta is dead, Laius is dead, Oedipus is presumed dead, Eteocles is dead, Polynices is dead. The corpses are starting to pile up like cordwood, as they do in any good tragedy. So now, the throne cannot pass to Antigone or Ismene, they're women, So the throne actually passes to Creon, who is Jocasta's brother. Now, Creon is married to a woman named Eurydice. So far as we know, no relation to Orpheus's Eurydice. And they have a son named Haman. And because this family tree is not screwed up enough as it is, Haman is engaged to be married to Antigone. So at that point, if they actually get married, they're going to be related 3 different ways. So this is getting more complicated than I can possibly draw. So you're just going to have to take my word for it. So Creon realizes that he's got 2 dead brothers, both of whom have a kind of claim to the throne of Thebes. But one of them has died defending Thebes, and the other died attacking Thebes. And so, as a result, Creon declares that Eteocles is going to be buried with full honors, and Polynices is going to be left to rot, which is the worst insult that you can give. And this is where Antigone starts, right? So Antigone has what we refer to dramaturgically as a late point of attack. That is to say, by the time the sort of curtain rises on the action, everything important has sort of already happened. What we're seeing is how this plays out. Antigone is in a double bind. The double bind means that she's damned if she does, damned if she doesn't. So she knows that as a loyal citizen of Thebes, she has a duty to obey the law. And the law says that anybody who buries Polynices will be put to death. But she also knows that as a sister, she has an obligation to see that the funeral rites are said for her brother. So she's got 2 competing obligations, and she cannot satisfy both. So she picks, and she says, I'm going to bury my brother. And of course, she gets caught. Now, Creon's the one in the double bind, because he has a legitimate affection for Antigone. He loves Antigone, and she's going to be his daughter-in-law. So he doesn't want to do anything to Antigone. But he's already laid down the law. And you can't be a good king if you say, this is the law, but hey, if a member of my family or somebody that I personally like breaks the law, that's okay. Right? That's going to mean civil war. So he knows that he's got these competing obligations, whether he's going to be a good king or whether he's going to be a good member of Antigone's family. And he decides to be a good king. He puts his emotions aside and says, okay, I'm going to nonetheless put her to death. But he tries to weasel out of his fate. He tries to say, well, what I'll do, I won't actually kill her. I'll just put her in a tomb, and there'll be some offerings there for the dead, so she'll be able to eat for a little while, and then she'll die, but it won't really be my fault, so I won't actually have killed her. And of course, nobody's buying this. Haman pleads with his father to change his mind, and Creon absolutely will not. Haman ultimately goes to the tomb of Antigone and falls on his sword. So Eurydice, his mother, finds him. She kills herself. So now Jocasta is dead, Laius is dead, Oedipus is dead, Eteocles is dead, Polynices is dead, Antigone is probably dead. Eurydice is dead, and Haman is dead. Right? So we've got a nice big pile of corpses at this point. At this point, Creon, overwrought by this, figures that he's made a mistake. And so he opens up the tomb, and sure enough, Antigone has hanged herself with her winding sheet. Right? So now Antigone is dead. So the only 2 people that are left from this whole thing are Creon, who is a rat bastard, right? And Ismene, who's a whiny little so-and-so. So This is plenty tragic. But what's tragic about it in the truest sense of the word is that through every generation, we see this family trying to avoid their fate, trying to avoid destiny, trying to cheat fate. And it never works. No matter what, they end up paying the price. Creon, right? He gets to live, but his world is destroyed. Right? His wife is dead, his child is dead, the woman who's going to be his daughter-in-law is dead. He's got to be devastated. And he's the king of a city that probably hates his guts at this point. Right? So when we're looking at this story, more than anything else, it's a story about not bad choices, not bad decisions, but a kind of inevitability, a kind of fate. Antigone doesn't die because she's a bad person or because she makes the wrong choice. She dies because that's her fate. Laius doesn't die because he's a horrible human being. He's doing what he thinks is right, but he has to die anyway. Oedipus, by all accounts, good, wise, brave Oedipus, nonetheless needs to be destroyed. So when we talk about tragedy, we're talking about a story in which a hero falls from a good condition, from a good state to a bad state. Not because of some fault or error, but simply because that's their fate. And this hero is somebody who is a good person, is in fact, Aristotle says, and I'll mention this later on, better than we are. So Antigone, I think, provides an excellent model for what Nietzsche is going to be talking about in terms of tragedy.